I was about to do a Ray J and say Charlemagne am I live. Welcome everybody. I'm really excited, really excited about today. Now, last week on Goldenlite Academy, our talk series, we had Justin Lawrence on who kicked us off with a deep discussion about substance use related to Black men in Los Angeles. Now, this is a two-part series, and I'm so excited this week. We're going to be talking with Bruce. And this is the thing, before I bring Bruce on, I think that a lot of times when we talk about mental health, it's in terms of data, it's in terms of numbers, there's usually agendas tied to it. Let me just make it real for you. A few months ago, let's say about 6 or 7 months ago, the LA Fire Department was at my house. Now I'm about to give y'all some inside information. How did the fire department get here? Were they here because I set a kitchen fire? Were they here because, somebody was in trouble with fire? No, they were here because I had a panic attack. And I've had a history of panic attacks most of my adult life. I've had a lot going on. I've been through some really difficult deaths, as we talked about back in December. And a lot of those, people will call it the dark night of the soul. A lot of those moments that have been difficult created this level of anxiety for me. And we're talking about me post-doctorate. We're talking about me running a college, me running a business. And mental health for Black men, it doesn't discriminate. It's not that you only see it in youth, or you only see it in people who are impoverished, or you only see it in people who are in gangs or who use substances. It's across the board, and for many different reasons. Being in this skin, being in this body, being in this country at this time, there are a lot of things that we have to go through. And so I thought I would bring on two of my closest brothers to have this conversation and to help us really talk about what was happening. Now, my panic attack happened. It's really embarrassing, but I got some food stuck in my throat, and I hadn't had a panic attack in about a year and a half. But I literally thought I was dying. I mean, it's not funny. It's funny now, but it wasn't at that moment. And that choking turned into a major panic attack for me. Now, interestingly enough, I wasn't aware that I was having a panic attack. I called my mom. She was on the phone. She's talking to the ambulance and to the fire department. But looking back, what I realized is that my history of calling 911 because I thought I was having a heart attack, the roots of that mental health issue for me really ties down to being a Black man and some of the struggles that we have to go through. I remember another panic moment for me was I was sitting in the airport in Burbank, and I was getting ready to fly home for an event, and I got a really difficult text message from a family member. And it just felt like it was very critical of me, and it challenged my core values about who I was and myself. It made me scared, and it sent me into a panic attack in Burbank Airport, getting ready to get on the plane. They're calling my name, and I'm in tears, and I'm having a hard time. I feel like I can't breathe. We often suppress emotions when it comes to things like panic attacks. We often cry at home in spaces by ourselves. We often hold in our pain until we have a heart attack. We often carry the weight of our families and our circumstances until it manifests as a stroke or cancer. And so we're tired of that. And I think it's a new moment for us to deal with some of the societal expectations, to find ways to address our self-medication and to heal the rage and the isolation that we feel as Black men of all demographics. So I'm bringing in Bruce McDaniel. Bruce is very important to me. I consider him a brother for sure. This is somebody that I've had the privilege to watch grow, who I've had the privilege to watch speak on stages in front of hundreds of people, who I've seen build a clothing line, who I have watched his own struggles with grief and with having to deal with some of the difficulties that we deal with. And so I'm really excited to bring him in. Before we get going, let's go ahead and take a look at this commercial, and then let's get started with this conversation. I'll be right. All right, everybody. Now, so we're getting ready to bring Bruce in, and I introduced him a little bit. Those of you guys who are tuning in, you've probably seen him on Instagram, you've probably seen him on YouTube, either speaking or promoting his fashion line. Bruce is an incredible individual, a mentor in Los Angeles, and he's a counselor. He's been through the substance use counseling program. I'm very excited to get into this conversation and to get it going. So let me bring in my brother Bruce McDaniel, and we're doing a virtual hand clap for you, Bruce. Welcome to Goldenlite Academy after all these years. Remember how you used to say, you used to threaten me like, "Oh, what's going on with Golden Global? Like, we need to get
Right,
it. We're here. We
right.
made it."
Well, congratulations, my good brother.
Man, it's so exciting to have you on here. And when I thought about talking about Black men and mental health, you were the first person I thought about in particular, because we have these conversations every day,
Right,
but also, we live these lives, and we have experienced so much of this together and separately. Bruce, one of the things I'm hoping you'll talk about today is some of the work that you've done in 12 steps groups, with gang members, and we also want to hear about your streetwear brand, and really talking about how you're taking fashion and making it about mental health and affirmation. So I want to talk a little about that. Now, today, the goal is for us to really discuss how do Black men process trauma, grief, and mental health struggles that we all have, and then how can we heal together, because we
right,
don't want to just re-traumatize everybody. It's already hard to be in this skin.
right.
So welcome. I'm really excited to have you. When we
Appreciate
were
you.
talking we were talking the other day, and I asked you, I said, what's the deal with Black men and mental health? What concerns you the most? And the first thing you said, I'm concerned about self-medication.
Right,
And that's a really interesting take, because a lot of times we talk about the circumstances, what leads us to have mental health issues. But from your perspective, we have this weight of medicating ourselves, which we can imagine for many different reasons. And I wonder for you, um, what patterns do you see in why we as Black men turn to either substances or other things to self medicate?
so to begin with, just to give people a quick, kind of roundabout, I just celebrated 5 years of sobriety Monday. So January 27th of 2020 is when, my higher power that I call God spoke to me and led me down a path of change, because it was literally life or death. I was at a suicidal point, and that's what kind of, not kind of, but that's what got me to a point that I either have to change or I'm going to die. And it's a very difficult spot to be in, where you want to kill yourself, but you don't want to die. Now, with that, the self medicating for me is the biggest factor, because that's something that I can do, and I'm instantly gonna feel better. I'm instantly gonna forget about what I'm necessarily dealing with, depending on how much I smoke, depending on how much I drink, depending on any other mind altering substances that I decide to pick up. It's an instant fix. So that's where I find that, and I'm not one to. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I listened to hip hop music. It never made me wanted to do anything. It was always the people who were closest to me that had the bigger influence versus what I was listening to on the radio or what I saw in a movie. Now, with the self medication portion, it's cultural, in a sense that when we're feeling wrong, when we're feeling down, it's whether it be, oh, I'm gonna go grab a beer, or smoke a cigarette. I'm gonna roll me up a blunt. It's because it's automatic that that dopamine is gonna kick in, and I'm gonna feel differently than when I felt when these first traumas first arise.
I'm gonna
So
feel better immediately.
it's an immediate fix. It's an immediate fix. That's what it is. Because as soon as that hits my bloodstream, I'm not going to feel the way that I felt previously. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm not sad anymore. I'm not going to say that I'm not grieving anymore, but I don't feel the same. And that
It's like a right now kind of thing. And what's
instant
interesting as we're
gratification.
talking, for Black men, right now is really important because I remember like growing up, some of the things that we heard were we don't know if we're going to live to 18 or to
Right.
30. So the right now is very important when you're
100%.
in, you're in this body. And you brought up suicide. I think some people don't know that suicide is the third leading cause of death among Black men
I
ages
did.
15 to 24. It's number three.
That's
And
crazy.
people will, like when we think about how society talks about Black men, like they're not really talking about what's happening for us in ending our lives.
Right.
Like Black kids are the number one demographic of children, of people, period, who are ending their lives in this country. And so it is serious. Now, when we talk about self medication, you alluded to substance use. So I have, friends of mine who drink, and that's how they deal with, what's going on for them, what's going on in their lives. Um, I see a lot of dudes who smoke weed. Um, and then I see other things, like being addicted to like hyper masculinity. Um, what are some other things, ways that you see that we self medicate?
Well, see, and that was one of the things that we had discussed prior to this conversation is that you'll also find that it can be regional. So you go down south, and down south there's a high strip club culture. Now, of course, we have strip clubs in LA, but the culture isn't the same. So if I'm talking to some of my boys that are in Houston, or I'm popping in with some of my boys that are in Atlanta, that's one of the things that they use to deal with whatever they're. Oh, I'm just gonna go hit the strip club. I'm gonna go turn up. That's just it's just a way. It's just another way for us to get outside of what we're feeling rather than dealing with it. And and on top of that, like you said, like the hypermasculinity, even being overly promiscuous. There was definitely a time in my life to where when it was all encompassing, it was all one. The drunker the more drunk I was, the more high I was. Of course, it lowers your inhibitions. I'm more likely to have unprotected sex. I'm more likely to jump in more women's DMs because I'm not as cautious because I'm under the influence. So it's an unfortunate thing, but that's what it is.
It's like one thing impacts the other. So
100%.
if I am, so that's interesting that we're talking about hypersexuality in general because that's one of the criticisms of Black men. But it's also interesting to me that Black men fall victim to being hypersexualized.
It's
And I think
100%.
people look at it and they'll think, oh, that's a good thing. I mean, people are attracted to y'all.
Right.
I saw recently Aaron Pierre on the Jennifer Hudson show as an example. And
Uh-huh.
this is a young man who just scored a huge deal with Disney and did The Lion King and played Mufasa. But
Hmm.
what were people talking about when he came down the road? They were sexualizing him.
Right.
And, and it's not to say that the community is wrong for being able to, say, okay, he's handsome or whatever. But
100.
it if I were in his shoes, I would also think, what does it feel like to be a talented actor?
Correct.
And to kind of, what people are looking at is my body. They're sexualizing me.
Right.
And so then when you talk about strip clubs, if we have grown up and we've been hypersexualized and we've kind of fit into this stereotype of, well, this is how Black men are. They're, sexually promiscuous and all these things. It's interesting that then we will go to the strip club as our way of self-medicating.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's like a right or wrong. It's just kind of like it makes sense.
And I'm the same way. By no means is anything that I'm going to mention ever wrong. I don't feel that there's wrong it's wrong for a person to have a drink and they want to relax. It's when it gets to that point that that's the only way that I'm able. It's a coping mechanism. It's the only way I can get through my day. It's the only way that I can handle stressors. That's when it becomes a problem, because if I'm at work and my boss pisses me off and I'm a drinker, I can't instantly go to my car and have a drink. So now I'm sitting in that. What's that?
Say, because you lose your job.
But now the bad part about that is now I'm sitting in this emotion that I normally would use a substance to cope with that. So now those are things like you were mentioning your panic attacks. Now I'm subject to having a panic attack at work because I'm not used to being able to walk through this very uncomfortable space without something to calm me down.
You don't have your medicine at that point.
100%.
And that does put us in really difficult situations, especially because this is how a lot of us are raised. And as somebody who's been a black man for 40 years, one of the things that I've heard often, and and it doesn't have to be malicious, but it's like, little man, really, for black boys in particular, it's like, you need to be hard, you need to be tough, you need to be stronger than them.
Yeah.
You
You
don't
have to
show
grow. You have to grow
vulnerability.
up
You
faster.
don't show weakness. You don't cry. If somebody hits you, you hit them back harder. These are things that we've heard, and it creates these grown black men who have now been socialized to believe that this is how men need to act. Like, this
Right.
is how we need to be. We need to be hard. We
Right.
need to be people who can't be vulnerable with our partners, our spouses. And I'm not surprised that then we will go into work and we don't have our medicine and we turn up, because what have we learned as children about how to speak up for ourselves in a vulnerable way without, I was about to
Right.
cuss on this thing, without like getting with somebody.
Right. So with touching on that is like vulnerability is very difficult as a black man, because even if I'm in a relationship and I speak up on how I feel, and it could be literally I'm looking for compassion, but I'm soft. It's man up. It's like, but and I get that whole portion that you were just speaking of in regards to being a child. Me and my sister grew up it was just me and my sister growing up. So I'm the baby. So I was spoiled. I was a cry baby. It's just who I was because I'm my mom's baby. I'm my mom's youngest. I'm the youngest grandchild. I'm the only grandson. So I was spoiled for a long time. Now, until I crossed over to, let's say, about the 12, 13 age, I was a crybaby. I was very spoiled. But then it went from one extreme to another. It went from the fact that, oh, he's a crybaby and he's spoiled, to now I don't know how to control my emotions. So
Mm.
it's now instant anger, it's instant rage, because I was never really given that opportunity to be in the middle of those two things. It's from crybaby to fighter. There's no in between.
Okay, so this is my question about that. Did you feel like that switch for you came because you weren't prepared to get older and to kind of be on your own without, since you had been spoiled, you had been the baby, had you not been prepared, or were you reacting to something?
So what I kind of like, what I think and believe it was, is that it was an extreme. So I went from, you know, growing up with my mother and then living with my grandparents. And with my grandparents, I'm getting a lot of love. I'm getting nurtured. This is a household that, we're eating dinner at the same time. It's a lot of structure. So once I kind of came into reality of the situation that was involving my father, it unleashed a certain level of rage inside of me. So the fact that I'm crying out for a father that I did not have, but I didn't have a way of expressing it. So it was literally the flip of a switch from, I want to say it was like the summer of probably sixth to seventh grade. I completely changed. I became a totally different, like, but prior to that, all I want to do is go outside and play. Let's play basketball. Let's run around. Let's play hide and seek. And
Was
then
Power Rangers?
Yeah, I'm literally, Power Rangers. We're coming home every day after school and it's Power Rangers.
Off
But
top.
it's like from that transition, I'm thrusted into I didn't get much of a, in a sense, like an adolescent period. It was literally I went from child to borderline young man in one summer.
Wow.
And because being a man of my stature, I've always been undersized. So now I have to prove myself. I have to poke my chest out. I have to show people that just because I'm smaller than you, you're not going to take advantage of me. So it is. It's a very fine line between where it is that, and we had this conversation previously as well. It's like having a safe space is so important for us. Um, I have a lot of people that I know. I have a lot of friends, but I know also at this point, I know who I can confide in. I know where my safe spaces are of people that I can speak with, whether it be you, whether it be Dre, whether it be Tyrone. These are people that I know that if I confide in them with, I could shed tears with you guys, and there's not a place of judgment. You guys might share tears back with me. Now, some of
Right.
my other,
I want to get to that. I
uh,
want to get to that in a minute because I have more questions about that. And
okay,
as you're talking, I'm thinking about some of the mental health concerns that we have. Anxiety and depression are huge within the Black male community. And what I found is that only about 25% of Black men who are experiencing anxiety or depression actually seek professional help. Now, when I heard that, I had a lot of different thoughts about why that could be the case. Again, I've
we
been
talked about
scamming
that as well.
for a long time, but I also know that uh, at least, and I think it's higher, but the data um, from our state says that 74% of Black males exposed to trauma have unmet mental health needs. Now, I tend to think that's probably higher because, again,
9 out of 10.
we're not talking about it.
Yep.
And
Agreed.
I'm gonna tell you, and what's interesting is that it's the people that you would least expect. Like these are people that I grew up watching Diddy.
Right.
Now I'm not gonna go too deep into this because then I have to back up.
Please don't.
I grew up watching Kanye West, and we're gonna talk about
R.
him in a little.
Kelly.
And it's so interesting the facades that we can put on. I know those are really extreme
Hmm.
examples, but it's on purpose
Right.
because it can be the pastor,
Right.
it can be your boss, it
Right.
can be your father in your household who is suffering with mental health issues, who has anxiety, who has depression, who has low self-esteem, who is has an eating disorder, all kinds of different things that we may not realize because we're so good at, hey, everything's okay, let's put on this Marvin Gaye and let's like.
Well, culturally, if we look into that, we know that as Black men, it's an unfortunate thing, but we're told get over it. We're told that's a weak to that's one of the biggest benefits that I've found in social media is a lot of these podcasts are the ones that I will pick up on are the ones that are leading us down this path that mental health is important for our communities because that's not something that we talk about regularly. We don't talk about our feelings. We don't talk about how I'm going to cope with the loss of a mother. Like I was disclosing to you before we started. I just had a friend of mine who was killed by a drunk driver early this morning. I have to sit in that. This is a friend of mine. And we haven't hung out as much recently because he moved to Las Vegas. But I'm gonna keep it a buck. This is somebody we party with. This is somebody we did that. We was in the streets together. And to now he's gone and he's removed from his daughter. He's removed from his family behind somebody who's under the influence and takes his life. But I still have to show up and I'm still gonna be. I'm using him like I do for my mother, like I do for my grandmother, other friends that I've lost to addictions, other friends that I've lost to suicides. I'm gonna continue to speak their names because that's another way for us all to heal. They're not forgotten. They're not
Yeah.
forgotten. I don't hesitate to speak up on. I used to mask my feelings with the best of them. I don't do that anymore. Where I'm at today is I'm gonna let you know exactly how I feel, and if it's not, if that feeling makes you uncomfortable, I don't know. I apologize, but I'm gonna tell you how I feel.
So, sorry for your loss, and I
Thank you.
understand loss. Every loss is different. That's something that I think is universal with Black men is we are always experiencing a death,
Right,
and in some way, whether it's friends, that we grew up with, or it's the death of relationships, it's losses, of our family members, losses of security. And so, I lift your friend up for sure, and we're sending you light. And just to wrap up this piece on self medication, it sounds like self medication is not just about using substances,
definitely not.
and it's about avoiding pain. It's about avoiding being vulnerable, whether it's because it's too scary or because that's how we were raised.
Right,
And it's about avoiding the stigmas that come with what happens when you are vulnerable. So now
right,
that's interesting because you just brought up a really good point, which is, well, then what do we do?
right.
Like, in other than self-medicating, what are our options? And you brought up something that I think is really important, and that is building safe spaces. So
Right.
what does that look like for Black men? Can you share a story of how maybe creating a safe space for you helped someone or helped you to open up?
Well, 100%. So we know every morning I'm up typically anywhere between 5 and 5:30. That's my time for meditation, my time for prayer, and I send out a morning prayer to roughly about 300 people, and that's done through copy and paste. This isn't one big thread, and I just send it once. No, I spend that hour that I dedicate every day, and in me doing that, I've had people who I've via social media that I've actually probably I've never met, and I've had them reach out to me and confide in me. I had a gentleman most recently. I'm not going to mention his name, and we have a lot of mutual friends through a couple of Facebook groups that we're in together. And excuse me. And he said, I don't know why, but I feel like you're somebody that I can talk to about this. And this wasn't addiction based. This wasn't substance based. It wasn't mental health based per se. It was some issues that he was having going on with his family. And in that, he knew that he was able to, because I the light that you speak of, like I said previously on our last talk, that's like one of my life mantras is for me to be a speck of light for people who are still trapped in the darkness in any form. Because if I see that speck of light, I know which way to go. So that's where I try to be. He felt that. He felt that he confided in me. And this is a man I've never met. I've had people reach out because of they know of my sobriety. I have all five of my year coins lined up on my countertop right now. Because people know that, they see that I look like them. They see clearly he knows what he's talking about. He lived the life because it's written all over my face. I've had people reach out to me and they're like, "How'd you do it, bro?" And they'll even ask questions like, "Do you think I have a problem?" And I'm like, hey, the only way to if once you start, you can't stop, you probably have a problem. So
You know, as you're talking, it reminds me about the power of brotherhood. And I think that this is something that we kind of talk about because it's like, oh, that's my boy, or, like, these are my partners, my crew.
right,
But that's not just a game for us. Like, that's not just um, like, this isn't a pop culture thing. Like, oh, I got a crew. It's
right,
survival for Black
right,
men. Like, our connections, our healing starts with brotherhood.
right,
And as you're talking, it is very much about we heal ourselves.
right.
We create these spaces for ourselves that we can be vulnerable. Now, some people will argue that's the barbershop. I don't necessarily always feel safe in the barbershop because
But see,
there's a lot of stuff going on.
I disagree with that 100% because the lingo is bro, but that don't mean you my brother.
Okay.
You get me?
And I see. Okay, so you just dropped a bar there, And some people will say, all skin folk and kinfolk. But
Th-
then, the
right.
other thing is that can we love our brothers, but also know that this is not a conversation for you?
Yeah. 100%. 100%. And it's a and that's where it kind of gets tricky again, because in a sense I want to make it where everybody can feel a part of. But if you're not adding to what we're doing, it's like, are you just here? Are you just here? Because I'm not with the gossip. I'm genuinely putting my best foot forward to help as many people as possible. And I'll bring up another gentleman. Like I said, I don't want to mention people by name, but another gentleman who graduated from the program from a peer support specialist. He's now working on getting his SUD. And this is somebody that, me and him speak on a regular basis. He has his I respect what the young man is doing based on the circumstances that life gave him, and he's out here putting foot to pavement, because talk is cheap.
Yes.
Talk is cheap.
So you sending out these texts, you creating these spaces is important, and I think that's one of the things that Black men can do. Treatment can look different. It doesn't have to be sitting on the couch with a
Right.
licensed psychologist. Sometimes those spaces are even more harmful for us. And I'm speaking by personal experience, where I've had to fire several therapists who started running their mouths and doing too much.
Right.
And I had to remind them that, like, healing does start at home. Now, I'm not saying that Black men should not tap into therapy, because I do think that we do struggle with some higher level mental health issues that require psychiatrists and require, something a little bit more than your pastor, and
Right.
that needs to be okay. I remember, see, this is why I think when we talk about Tupac in particular, this is why I think that he was so important to the culture. There's a lot of rappers who had hits.
Right.
There's a lot of rappers who were on death row. There's a lot of rappers who were talking about the same themes that Tupac was talking about. But when you listen to Tupac, you feel a sense of brotherhood. You
Right.
feel like in a song like Keep Your Head Up, he is literally pouring into you
Right.
as a Black man and saying, I know you're fed up, but
Right.
bro, keep your head up. Like this is where I think I'd love to see us go more as a culture. If we had some more affirming and positive stuff, that it's not just performing, but it's really about lifting us up. It's really about saying, like, I see you, I see what you're going through, and I don't need to just teach you how to get money, but I also want to make sure your soul and your spirit
Right.
is
So,
okay.
I'm glad I'm glad you did bring that up, because that's something else that we were talking about. Is like why I'm so partial to Larry June. And Larry June, being he's from San Francisco, and Larry June has a past. And, been in the streets. He did his pimping, so his sold his drugs. But if you listen to his music now, he'll tell you what he did in his past. But he's also going to tell you that getting out riding your bike and being in nature is good for you. Eating healthy is good for you. How are we going to invest in these properties to build us some generational wealth? Those are the things that we need to tap into more. And it's not to say that his music is that he's above anybody else or anything like that. The point that I'm making is he's lived the same life a lot of us have lived. However, where are we going?
Right.
And that's all it's about. It's like I have a past with the best of them, but where am I going? That's why I try to, like I said, that's why on a daily basis I try to show people through my actions, not just through my words.
I love that. And we need to talk more about not just our financial health, but the health of our bodies, because your mental health is tied in directly to what you
Holistic,
eat.
it's holistic. It's all one.
You can't fix one part of the body and neglect the other and think that you're going to be okay.
Right,
It's mind, it's body, it's spirit, and it's
right,
soul.
right,
And so, like, I recently realized that there was a part of me that was feeling a little broken, and I was like, no, I'm doing good in my career. I'm pretty stable with my mental. Like, I've been eating well and going to the gym, but something feels a little off. Like I don't feel as good.
Right.
And I started going to a few more um, church services, and I started to pray more and to meditate more. And I just amped up the amount of spiritual work I was doing. And I realized you were spiritually thirsty. Like you were pouring so much into Golden Global and into, getting into the gym and trying to be in competition with everybody else for the summer body, that you forgot that you need to tap in with God. You need to tap in with your spirit. And from that time on, I started to realize, since I went back into some of those spiritual pieces, that I'm feeling better. I'm feeling calmer. I'm feeling more centered.
Right.
I feel like I have this spiritual strength where I can be better at Golden Global, or I can go harder in the gym. And
Right.
so I think that's pretty dope. I hope that we talk
100%.
about it. There's people who talk about it. Lupe Fiasco talks about it. Big
Yeah.
Sean talks about it. He has some initiatives right now for Black men's mental health. Lil Jon, and I encourage anybody out there, if y'all didn't know, and we're talking about From the Windows to the Wall.
Right.
We're talking about that one. But Lil Jon actually has a series of meditations that he's doing. I think this is so dope because, here's somebody who was loud as hell in the club,
Right.
and here he is
That's
speaking
the king
softly.
of crunk.
Like we're talking about, people don't know about this today, but when you used to have beats in the back of your car,
Oh yeah.
in the trunk,
Yeah. 215s.
so we're talking about that Lil Jon. But
Right.
today, he has meditations, guided meditations, and he's really pushing this agenda for us to be at peace and to rest our souls. So I love hearing that. Now, one of the things, the antithesis of rest, I think for Black men, is the rage that we carry. And a lot of people have talked about Black male rage for a long time. They've either said that, well, this is a result of coming out of slavery. This is a result of being hung from trees. This is the result of Jim Crow. This is the result of mass incarceration, of crack epidemic. But for Black men in particular, I think that there's a stereotype of being the deadbeat that continues to cause a lot of rage. Where it's very difficult for us to escape this idea that we're not doing enough for everybody. Some people are probably deadbeat.
Right.
Like there's some people, there's some Black men who need to take care of their kids.
Right.
But I think that our rage from how we're treated throughout not just our community, but within the jail system, within the treatment system, is really difficult. And so, what's your idea about how we deal with sort of like unprocessed trauma and grief that creates rage? Like, does anything outside of talking to people work for you?
Well, see, I mean, and that's funny that you bring that up as well, because that's something else that's generational. You can't just assume or even expect us to cut off things that have. And I'm gonna bring this up. Segregation is less than a lifetime ago.
Oh, that's happening right now.
But you know what I'm. You know what it is. But you know what I mean. They try to. It's brought up as if it was generations ago. This is one generation ago, and because the pictures are in black and white, they want to make it seem like it was so long ago. So allowing,
A lot of our parents literally were in segregated schools. Literally. My
and
dad grew
that's
up
that's
in
the
South Carolina.
that's the point. That's the point. So to the rage that we have within is because this is the lives we were born into. That's just what it is, and it's not realistic to expect it to be cut off in a generation. Now, as far as like what I do for my rage, and I grew up with real bad anger issues. Um, it is my connection with God. It is getting back into the gym. It is having it's knowing who you can what you can put on the shoulders of whom. There's certain things that, and I've had this conversation with you previously. There's certain things I'm not gonna put on my sister's table. She's not able to. to handle certain situations that I'm able to deal with. But those are conversations that I can have with my brothers. Those are conversations that I can have with you. It's when you have that awareness of who you are to begin with, you'll start to be able to realize, and you know the relationships, you know the people that you have in your life. There's certain things there are certain conversations I'm not going to have with certain people. So, and that also helps me maintain balance in my life because I can take certain things to Dre. I can take other things to Tyrone. I can take other things to Dr. Golden. But I know what I've I've done enough in this. I've done the work enough that I know where to take each issue.
The other thing I've seen us do is tap into art. And I think that some of the work that you do in fashion is really important. I want to talk about that. When I think about art and I think about artists, I think about Kanye West. Now, Kanye West is a polarized figure. Every year, I feel differently about him. I went
I
from
know I've seen it.
I was the biggest Kanye West fan when he first came out. That's why I got this preppy sweater on today. I was the biggest Kanye West fan. I waited for him outside the Grammys before people even knew who he was. And, he stopped and talked to me and my best friend on the street.
Mhm.
This is before College Dropout was released, but we were fans of Jay-Z, so we knew who Kanye was. And the guy that I met on right outside the Staples Center in 2003 was a genuine, good-hearted brother to the point where he didn't know us at all. He was grateful that we recognized him, and he invited us to, he was like, "Y'all coming to the party?" And we couldn't make it. Luckily, we didn't go because I might have ended up, in court today with this Diddy situation. And
Don't
I
do that.
don't know.
Don't do that. Don't do
I'm just saying,
that.
I don't know. Like, I wasn't trying to be in the situation, but my point is, we've seen Kanye struggle publicly.
Right.
He struggled with breakdowns over the years. He struggled with losing certain relationships, and I'm talking about pre-Kardashian because
Yeah.
this other stuff is a
Even
reaction.
when he lost his mother.
His mom, his fights that he's had, even though some of us will look at it and be like, that's rich people's problems, like he was
Right.
really pressed about what was happening in the fashion industry and feeling like he was being othered and left out. But what is disappointing looking back, and I take responsibility for some of this, is how we didn't take his mental health seriously as a
Right.
community. And instead of treating him, instead of having compassion for him, there was a lot of judgment. It was
Right.
either a lot of judgment or there was a lot of making fun of or a lot of excusing behaviors that were
Right.
really harmful to us.
Right.
And I wonder, what are your thoughts about how public figures like Kanye West or anybody else who looks like us but struggling with mental health, how do they reflect some of the bigger struggles that we have?
So I mean, and just to begin with, that's why I say, me personally, I don't want fame. Like I would love for my brand to take off, but the being famous, the everything that comes along with that takes a lot. And I do
Like
have
you being a
compassion
ghetto superstar.
to be of that level, the level of a Kanye West, the level of a LeBron James, where it transcends culture. Everybody knows who you are. Now, as far as like the Kanye goes, it's a sad situation when there is no compassion for the man, and it's clear he's struggling. Now, that also, I'm also a firm believer, based on how his behaviors would go so up and down. I personally believe that's somebody who is either 100% off their meds, or that's someone who's over medicated. That's just how I personally feel. Now, I'm, and we had this conversation earlier as far as the Einstein quote, and it's a thin line between insanity and genius. And he can show you insane, and he can show you genius. And he's riding that line at any given time. So I'm very compassionate for, as far as his mental health. But it makes it difficult, because the reason why I think it becomes difficult is because he's also a jerk.
It's too much.
So it makes it where
He does too much. That's what makes it hard. It's
it's
like, bro,
like,
we want to support you, but
yeah,
I mean, now
you're
you're
somebody, it's easy to hate you.
I cannot say that because, but it's just I wish love and light to Kanye. Like I miss the old Kanye, and
Right,
that's not to say that I'm rejecting his growth,
right,
but we miss the guy who just was loved us and showed that and um felt like he was talking to us the way that Tupac did. You know, like
right.
when College Dropout came out, when Late Registration, it was really about let me lift up my bros. Like, yeah, I'm up here in my pursuit of fame and money, but I miss that so much. I think Nipsey was the same way,
Right,
and you know, like we have incredible attachments to these artists who are like that. For me, it was Rakim. You
right.
know, I used to feel like that's why I'm not mad at. I can't focus on Nelly because I'm like, well, Nelly. I mean, I don't know if you were ever lifting us up like that. Snoop, I don't know. Like some, I go back and forth with him, but I think about the guys who have lifted us up through our journeys and the people that we've looked at for inspiration and
Well,
healing and
just
help.
but just to tap into that real quick because it's funny because they're entertainers and Nelly ain't a person. Nelly's an entertainer. Snoop Dogg ain't a person. He's an entertainer. So that's where it's like I get it because he did go out on that rant about who's going to be the first to perform for Trump, and then he ends up doing it. But Calvin Broadus votes. Snoop Dogg performs.
I'm not even going to get into that too.
I know, but I had to do it.
Um, I think that when we talk about light, which is what we talked about, and you know, Nipsey talked in Victory Lab about dedication is hard work plus
Plus
patience.
patience.
And Common, somebody, another person who I go back and forth with, he said, there are times when you'll need someone and I will be by your side. I think that when we talk about where do we go from here, what do clinicians need to know? What do allies and family members of Black men who might be watching this or who will watch this later, how can they show support? What kind of strategies should we be aware of as non-Black men that could be supportive? What do you think is important for people to understand?
So that's once again that's kind of always like a tricky conversation because I don't ever want it to come across like we need more care than the next man. You know what I mean? However, what it is for me is it has to come a point where these safe spaces widen. It can't be limited to, oh, I live in this section where, and I'm for instance I'm going to use Lamert Park as an example. I can't be I can't be where this is the only safe space of Black owned businesses. And you go out Lippert Park on any given day, and there are people out there playing music, and there's it's all Black owned businesses, and you can walk in and they're having yoga sections, and they're having, you get that. It can't be limited to a Black area. It can't be limited to one particular region that I'm in where I'm able to get care. It has to be expanded. It has to be expanded. I don't. I shouldn't have to be. I live in the valley. There has to be, and North NoHo. You get a little bit more of that. You're gonna find some stuff in NoHo, but it can't be limited to where I have to be in this one area to feel okay, to feel where I can speak freely. That's my perspective.
You know, representation is important. And when I was doing some research for this episode, I realized that only 4% of all people who are clinicians are Black. And that is deep to me because we have a much higher percentage in this country of a population. You know, there's just things that we experience that are very difficult to contextualize. You know, like this is part of why treatment was hard for me, and I ended up finding a really good therapist. Now I know a lot of really good Black clinicians, and these are people that even at Golden Global, when people will reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'm ready to start my healing journey," we can link them with services with Black clinicians. It could
Right.
be gay clinicians. It can be people who come from different areas, and they're not all in Leimert Park. They're not all in Inglewood.
Right.
Some of them are in Beverly Hills. Some
Right.
of them are in Woodland Hills. Some of them are in Laguna Beach.
Right.
But it's very sparse. Their caseloads are full all the time. There's Black yoga programs where it's like, we're at capacity for this
Right.
class, so we need more.
Right. It's that
We need
it's
more
that
options.
it's that level of expansion, and that's like I said, why I keep going back to the impact, of course, of social media. Is you're able to see a lot more people who are now putting the emphasis on our self-care. Now, that still has to expand. It has to get bigger. We have to merge with other cultures as well to expand the amount of care that we also need. Because if we limit it strictly to us, we're still putting a limit on ourselves.
And you've done a couple of things that I'd like for you to talk about. One that I think is really incredible is providing support through Gang Members Anonymous, and that's something that to me is a really safe space for people who, especially people who look like us, communities of color who have experiences with gangs, but being able to sit in those meetings and to not feel like you're othered because you have tattoos or because you grew up in this set or this block.
Right.
That's an example of opening the door, and the other is your clothing line. But talk about those for a second.
And I wasn't gonna use his name, but yeah, Fred is making things happen with with the meeting that he's facilitating, and I believe it's Tuesdays, and I want to say it's at 6 or 7, but it's Tuesdays and it's downtown LA. And Criminal and Gang Members Anonymous, as I spoke about previously, it's a life changing thing, because what you'll find is you're gonna find very few addicts or alcoholics that have not participated in some type of criminal activity. It pretty much it goes hand in hand. It's all encompassing. So when you're in those meetings, yes, it's very impactful. It's very powerful when you see people who are complete opposites, and you may be in a room with an enemy, but these are people who they want to change their lives. So it hits hard. It hits a lot differently than somebody who's trying to get sober and somebody who's trying to get clean versus somebody who wants to completely change their life. Because that's some people don't forget. You can't just tell some people that I don't live that life anymore. So that's a big thing. And I've kind of I haven't been able to hit that meeting as much as I would like, but I show him support in another way, and we're gonna double back around to the social media. That's somebody I don't hesitate to share. His story is so impactful that I don't hesitate to share his journey, because his journey motivates me just watching his growth on a daily basis. So
It's
shout
really
out my boy
phenomenal.
Fred.
Oh, I feel that's my student. So,
Yeah,
uh,
right,
you know, I'm fully in support of the work that Fred does, and
right,
thank you for lifting it. Fred, you got to come on the show.
right. He might be tuned in. I had sent him the link, but depending on if not, he's definitely gonna pick up. He's definitely gonna hear his name call, and he's definitely gonna reach out. Theo
Um,
too. Theo more than likely will be jumping on.
Another one of my homeboys. I'm so proud of y'all. And so, what's next for you? You're putting together. Well, you've been developing, and you're kind of getting ready to launch a
Right.
clothing line. But tell us a little bit about that.
So Forever Humble, the brand is it's about positive affirmations. It is to bring awareness to mental health. It is to bring awareness to addiction. And they're positive affirmations. So of course, without mentioning too much, because I mean we live in a world where
We know how
I
it
don't
is.
want my stuff getting stolen.
Right.
So pretty much these items that you'll be wearing are essentially they're positive affirmations. They're made and they're designed to get the best out of you. They're made and designed to bring awareness to the fact that even in our differences, we're all alike. It's made to bring light to, hey, life, and I'm gonna say this: life is never perfect for anyone. So whether a person is and I'll use this as an example as well as um Anthony Bourdain. Anthony Bourdain, he's traveling the world. He's eating all the finest foods. He's on television. That's someone who still killed himself. So just because it may look a certain way internally I could be fighting the biggest struggle of my life.
Yes.
So that's why I try to be as compassionate to everybody that I encounter, because you never know what somebody is dealing with. It can look peaches and cream. I could be hopping out of a Rolls Royce Phantom and inside I'm dying. And then you have some people, I could be hopping out of a 1989 Honda Civic and I'm happier than this guy who is making 30 times more than what I make.
It wasn't it Notorious B.I.G. who said "My money, my problems." You know,
Right.
it doesn't discriminate. It
It
really
doesn't.
doesn't, and we do need
Mental.
to start checking on each other more and saying, like, this is what I do. I get right into business. I'll be like, you ask everyone, "How you doing, bro?" "Oh, I'm good. I'm solid. Everything okay. Let's step over here for a second. Now, how
Right.
are you really doing?"
Right. Right. And that goes back to, the mental health and addiction. They run hand in hand, and it does not discriminate. It'll attack people of all color lines, of all ethnic backgrounds, of all financial status. So having people that you can just reach out to, and people that you can confide in, is big for my mental health, because I have a therapist that I see on a bi-weekly basis, and these aren't heavy sessions, because I've
Maintenance.
they're not heavy sessions because I was able to cross, and this was one of the times that I was in treatment and didn't stay sober. Excuse me, I had this hate for my father from childhood, and it was to the point that I literally couldn't even discuss the man without breaking out in tears. Well, my therapist at this time, while I was in treatment, had me do where I wrote a letter to him, and it was deep, and say everything we felt, and let it go on a balloon. And in that moment, I was freed of that, to where I was able to forgive a man that I hadn't seen in a decade, 2 decades. It was that powerful. So I'm all for it. Anything that you could do that outside of course, any type of bodily harm. Of course, like some people are able to go out and have a drink and suppress, but we know who if you have a problem, if you're being honest with yourself.
Bruce, I got to have you back on this year, of course. And thank you so much for your light and for who you are in this community and for keeping it real and being yourself. I get tired of people faking the funk and coming up in here and playing
Hey,
games.
I can't do it.
Like,
You see the Malcolm back there and all. I'm at the house. I ran home. I
that's my
ran home.
home.
I'm on the clock right now. But anytime I'm asked to come out and speak, it's gonna come from a genuine place. I'm always gonna speak from the heart, and I always will be thankful for the light you've added to my life.
Thank you, bro. All right, we're giving Bruce a virtual hand clap. And what an incredible, incredible show today. I feel honored. I feel grateful. We learned a couple things. One, self medication for Black men can look a lot of different ways in trying to handle our trauma, in trying to fight system neglect. There is the powerhood of brotherhood and collective healing, and redefining success and mental wellness for ourselves through the things we tell ourselves to the people we involve ourselves with, and finding a community so we can break that silence. I want to leave you all with the words of Common. There are times when you'll need someone, and I will be by your side. Thank you for supporting Golden Global Enterprises. If you need help, reach out. If you need support, reach out. We are grateful for you. And until we check in next week with Dr. Carol Brown, be blessed, be of joy, be healed. Oh,